Picture this. 1500 years before Christ was born, out on the Great Plains, where the grass stretches to every horizon and the wind never, ever stops. We're talking about a landscape so vast that it makes the mind reel. Imagine standing in the middle of an ocean, but instead of water, it's grass. Endless, rolling grass that bends and flows like waves under a sky so big it seems to swallow everything. And in this immensity, there's a small band of people, maybe 40 souls in total. They call themselves the people of the Yellow Hawk, and right now, they're in serious trouble. Winter has come early this year, and when I say winter on the Great Plains, 1500 years before Christ, I'm talking about something that would make a modern blizzard look like a gentle snow flurry. The temperature has dropped to what we'd call 20 below zero, and the wind is howling across those grasslands at 50 miles per hour. That's not just cold, folks. That's the kind of cold that kills. Yellow Hawk's people are huddled in their winter shelters, and these aren't the sophisticated structures we'll eventually talk about. No, these are desperate, improvised things, bent willow frames covered with whatever animal skins they could gather, weighed down with rocks and buffalo bones. They're crude, they're leaking, and right now, they're failing spectacularly. The wind is finding every gap, every weak point in these makeshift shelters. Snow is driving through the walls like frozen bullets. The fires inside are smoking terribly because there's no proper ventilation, and people are faced with an impossible choice: freeze to death or suffocate from smoke. Some of the older people are already coughing up blood. This is one of those moments in history where everything hangs by a thread, where the difference between survival and extinction comes down to someone having exactly the right idea at exactly the right moment. That someone is Morning Star. She's maybe 20 years old, which in 1500 before Christ makes her practically middle-aged. She's huddled in one of the failing shelters with her infant son, watching the smoke from their pitiful fire swirl around the interior instead of going up and out like it should. The baby is coughing, and she can see in his eyes that glassy look that means hypothermia is setting in. And that's when she sees it. Outside, barely visible through the driving snow, there's an eagle, a golden eagle, riding the wind currents like they're invisible highways in the sky. This bird isn't fighting the wind, it's using the wind. Its wings are angled just so, creating channels that direct the airflow exactly where the eagle wants it to go. Now, you have to understand something about the people of this time and place. They weren't just casual observers of nature, they were students of it. Their lives depended on reading every sign, understanding every pattern. When Morning Star watches that eagle surf, windstorm, she's not just seeing a pretty bird. She's seeing a lesson in aerodynamics that won't be formally understood by Europeans for another 3,000 years. She studies how the eagle's wings create what we'd now call a Venturi effect, the way the curved shape accelerates airflow and creates lift. She notices how the bird adjusts the angle of its wingtips to control direction. Most importantly, she sees how the eagle creates what amounts to controllable flaps that channel the wind exactly where it needs to go. And suddenly, she understands what's wrong with their shelters. The next morning, when the storm finally breaks, Morning Star begins experimenting. She takes 2 long pieces of buffalo hide and attaches them to poles above the smoke hole of their shelter. She angles them like eagle wings, creating adjustable flaps that can be moved to catch and direct the wind. The first attempt is a disaster. She gets the angle wrong, and instead of drawing the smoke up and out, the flaps create a downdraft that fills the shelter with choking smoke. The second attempt isn't much better. The flaps catch too much wind and nearly tear the whole shelter apart. But Morning Star is nothing if not persistent. Day after day, she adjusts the design. She tries different angles, different positions, different ways of controlling the flaps. Some of the other band members think she's lost her mind. Others watch with the kind of skeptical interest you reserve for someone who might just be onto something revolutionary. And then, on the 7th day of her experiments, something magical happens. She's positioned the flaps at just the right angle, and when the evening wind picks up, it creates a perfect draft. The smoke from their fire gets caught in the airflow and drawn straight up and out through the opening. But more than that, and this is the part that makes her gasp out loud, fresh air is being pulled in along the ground, creating a circulation system that keeps the shelter warm while clearing out the smoke. For the first time in generations, Yellow Hawk's people can have a warm fire and breathable air at the same time. But Morning Star isn't done innovating. Over the following months, as they work their way across the plains following the buffalo herds, she makes another crucial observation. The circular base of their shelters isn't just convenient, it's the strongest possible shape. Think about it. Birds build round nests, not square ones. The sun follows a circular path across the sky. When buffalo are threatened, they form a circle for defense. In nature, the circle represents strength, unity, completeness. Morning Star understands instinctively what engineers wouldn't prove mathematically for millennia, that a circular structure distributes stress more evenly than any other shape. She convinces the band to standardize on 17 poles for their lodge frames. Why 17? Because that's the number of days in what they call the best hunting moon, the lunar cycle, when the buffalo are fattest and the hunting is easiest. Each pole is selected from a different type of tree to balance flexibility and strength. The main support poles come from lodgepole pine, straight and strong. The lighter poles come from willow, flexible enough to bend without breaking in high winds. The covering evolves too. Instead of random animal skins stitched together, Morning Star develops a system using specially prepared buffalo hides. The women learn to brain tan these hides using the buffalo's own brain matter mixed with bone marrow, creating a material that's waterproof yet still breathable. It's a process that takes weeks and requires incredible skill, but the result is revolutionary. Then comes the innovation that will define this technology for the next 3,000 years, the three-layer system. Morning Star realizes that the secret isn't just the outer covering, it's what happens between the layers. She develops an inner liner that hangs about 6 inches inside the outer wall, creating a dead air space that acts as insulation. That trapped air layer makes these shelters warmer than the log cabins European settlers will build centuries later. By 300 before Christ, word of these innovations has spread across the plains like wildfire. 18 different clans gather for what becomes the first great knowledge-sharing ceremony. For 4 days, the most skilled lodge makers from across the grasslands share their techniques, their measurements, their understanding of wind and weather. It's during this gathering that the basic principles get standardized, even as each tribe maintains its own variations and improvements. The Crow people develop a 24-pole system for their largest ceremonial lodges. The Cheyenne create portable windbreak attachments for extra protection. The Lakota begin painting the inner liners with family histories, turning functional insulation into living art. But here's what makes this story truly remarkable. This isn't just about technology. This is about a completely different way of thinking about the relationship between humans and their environment. These people aren't trying to conquer nature, they're trying to dance with it. Every innovation builds on careful observation of natural patterns, on understanding rather than domination. And that philosophy is about to face its greatest test. Because change is coming to the Great Plains. Horses are coming. Europeans are coming. And with them, both the golden age of this ancient technology and the beginning of its greatest trial, because in 1650 after Christ, everything is about to change. The year is 1650 after Christ, and everything has changed. Spanish horses have exploded across the Great Plains like a force of nature, and with them has come what we can only call the golden age of teepee technology. We're talking about a revolution so profound that it transforms not just how these people live, but how they think about space, time, and their relationship with the vast grasslands that stretch beyond every horizon. And at the center of this revolution is a woman named Maria Crow Feather. Picture her. She's perhaps 35 years old, which makes her a master of her craft in an era when mastery meant the difference between life and death. She belongs to the Blackfoot Nation, and she holds a title that might sound simple but carries enormous weight. Lodge keeper. In her world, this doesn't just mean she knows how to set up a tent. It means she's a master engineer, meteorologist, and architect all rolled into one. Maria can read wind patterns like you and I read books. She can look at the way grass bends 3 miles away and tell you exactly how the weather will change over the next 6 hours. She can feel barometric pressure shifts in her bones and adjust her family's lodge accordingly. When other families' shelters are struggling against sudden storms, Maria's lodge stands steady and warm, smoke rising straight and true from its peak. But it's not just about survival anymore. With horses, these people can carry bigger lodges, move faster across the plains, and follow the buffalo herds with a precision that was impossible in the walking days. A family that once struggled to transport a 12-foot lodge can now easily manage structures 20 feet across and 25 feet high. That might not sound enormous until you realize we're talking about a living space larger than many modern apartments, yet completely portable and designed to withstand weather that would destroy conventional buildings. The mathematics involved here are staggering. Maria has internalized calculations that European engineers won't formalize for another 2 centuries. She knows that the base diameter must be exactly 1/3 the length of the longest poles for optimal stability. She understands that the smoke hole must be precisely 1/15 of the floor area to create perfect ventilation. Get these ratios wrong, and your lodge becomes either a smoke-filled death trap or a wind-torn disaster. But here's where it gets really interesting. But here's where it gets really interesting. To her, they're living relationships, patterns that mirror the sacred geometry she sees everywhere in nature. The proportion of lodge base to pole length echoes the relationship between a tree's crown and its trunk. The smoke hole ratio reflects the balance between a bird's body and its wingspan. Watch her on a typical morning as she teaches her 3 daughters the art of reading the wind. The sun is just cresting the eastern horizon, and the lodge door flap faces directly toward it not by accident, but by ancient design. The east-facing entrance welcomes the morning sun, providing light and warmth as the day begins. But more than that, it positions the lodge to work with the prevailing wind patterns that sweep across the plains. See how the grass moves, Maria tells her eldest daughter, Redbird. The wind comes from the southwest this morning, but it will shift to the northwest by afternoon. Watch the smoke flaps. And here's where the genius of this technology really shows itself. Throughout the day, Maria and her daughters adjust the smoke flaps like sailors trimming sails. These aren't static structures, they're dynamic, responsive, constantly adapting to changing conditions. When the wind shifts, the flaps shift with it, creating perfect draw that pulls smoke up and out while bringing fresh air in along the ground. The system works so well that a properly managed lodge maintains a steady temperature differential, warmer air rising naturally, while cooler air flows in to replace it. It's a convection system that exchanges the entire air volume every 4 minutes, providing fresh air without losing heat. Modern engineers study these principles today when designing energy-efficient buildings. But the real innovation explosion happens during the Great Gatherings. Picture this. It's the summer of 1653, and the largest intertribal gathering in living memory is taking place along the Yellowstone River. We're talking about maybe 3,000 people from a dozen different nations, and each group has brought their latest innovations in lodge technology. The competition is fierce and friendly. The Crow Nation has developed their revolutionary 24-pole system for ceremonial lodges so large they can hold 200 people for important ceremonies. These structures require engineering precision that rivals medieval cathedral construction. Every pole must be precisely positioned, every angle calculated to perfection. The Cheyenne have created portable windbreak attachments that can be deployed around a lodge in minutes, creating a microclimate that extends the living space and provides additional protection from harsh weather. Think of it as the world's first modular architecture system. The Lakota have perfected the art of liner painting, creating inner walls that tell family histories while providing crucial extra insulation. These aren't just decorations, they're functional art that serves as both historical record and thermal barrier. The paintings depict battle victories, spiritual visions, and family genealogies. But the liner itself creates that essential dead airspace that can mean the difference between comfort and hypothermia. And then there's the speed factor that absolutely boggles the mind. Maria and her team, because lodge management is always a team effort, can disassemble their 20-foot lodge in exactly 7 minutes. 7 minutes to take apart a structure that's larger than many modern homes, bundle all the components, and load them onto horses. They can reconstruct the same lodge in 12 minutes flat, faster than most people today can set up a modern camping tent. This isn't just efficiency, it's survival technology perfected over generations. When a sudden storm threatens or buffalo herds start moving, the ability to pack up and relocate quickly can mean the difference between prosperity and disaster. But perhaps most remarkably, this entire technological system is controlled by women. In the European world of 1650, women have virtually no say in architecture, engineering, or major technological decisions. But here on the Great Plains, women are the undisputed masters of what might be the most sophisticated portable architecture system ever developed. They control the family's most valuable possessions after horses. They make the critical decisions about where to camp, how to position the lodge, when to move. This gives women enormous power in tribal economics and politics. A skilled lodge keeper like Maria does Crow Feather isn't just managing a household, she's demonstrating technological mastery that directly translates to political influence. When the band needs to choose camping locations or decide whether to relocate, Maria's voice carries weight, because everyone knows she understands the technical requirements better than anyone. The social implications are staggering. We're looking at a society where technological expertise and gender roles are organized in ways that won't be seen in European cultures for centuries. Women aren't just participants in the technological system, they are the technological system, and the innovations keep coming. Lodge keepers develop specialized tools. Bone awls for precise hide work, sinew thread that's stronger than modern synthetic materials, brain tanning techniques that create waterproof yet breathable materials that modern outdoor gear companies are still trying to replicate. They perfect the art of hide selection, choosing different types of skins for different parts of the lodge. Buffalo cow hides for the main covering, thinner and more flexible than bull hides, easier to work with but just as durable. Elk hide for the smoke flaps, naturally water-resistant and able to maintain flexibility in extreme cold. Deer hide for interior details, soft, warm, and beautiful when properly prepared. The whole system reaches a level of sophistication that honestly makes modern camping gear look primitive by comparison. These lodges can withstand winds of 120 miles per hour, stronger than most modern houses. They maintain comfortable interior temperatures in weather that would challenge modern heating systems. They provide superior ventilation compared to conventional buildings, and they do it all while being completely portable. But even as this golden age reaches its peak, even as Maria Crow Feather teaches her daughters secrets that represent thousands of years of accumulated knowledge, change is coming to the Great Plains. European settlers are pushing westward. Government policies are being formed in distant capitals. The buffalo, herds that have sustained this way of life for millennia, are about to face an unprecedented threat. Because in 1876, everything that Maria and her people have built is going to be tested in ways they never imagined. 1876. The number alone should send chills down your spine if you know anything about the history of the American West. This is the year of the Little Bighorn, the year Custer fell, the year the United States government decided once and for all that the Plains Indians had to be broken, contained, and transformed into something they were never meant to be. But we're not here to talk about battles. We're here to talk about something far more devastating than any military defeat: the systematic destruction of a way of life that had sustained millions of people for thousands of years. We're here to talk about the death of the buffalo, and with them, the end of the greatest portable architecture system ever developed. Meet Joseph White, Eagle. He's 63 years old, which makes him ancient by the standards of his time and place. He's a lodge maker, one of the last masters of the traditional arts that we've been following through this story. And right now, he's watching his world disappear. The buffalo are dying, not dying naturally, not dying seasonally as they always have, but dying systematically, deliberately, as part of a military strategy designed to starve the plains tribes into submission. Professional hide hunters with powerful rifles are slaughtering entire herds for their skins alone, leaving the meat to rot on the grasslands. In a single decade, the North American buffalo population drops from 30 million to fewer than 1,000 animals. Think about that number for a moment. 30 million to 1,000. It's not just ecological catastrophe, it's the complete destruction of the resource base that made teepee culture possible. No buffalo means no hides for lodge covers. No buffalo means no sinew for thread. No buffalo means no brain matter for tanning. No buffalo means no wool for insulation. Joseph White Eagle sits outside his lodge on a bitter morning in late November, watching the last small herd his band has seen in 6 months disappear over the southern horizon. These aren't the massive herds of his youth, the thundering multitudes that could take 3 days to pass a single point. This is maybe 40 animals, thin and skittish, the scattered remnants of something that once seemed as eternal as the grasslands themselves. But the buffalo aren't the only thing disappearing. 2 days ago, government agents came to Joseph's camp with papers written in a language he cannot read, demanding that he send his grandchildren to a boarding school 300 miles away. The agents explained through an interpreter that the children would learn to be civilized, which apparently means they'll be forbidden to speak their own language, practice their own religion, or learn the traditional skills that have kept their people alive for countless generations. Joseph's grandson, Little Wolf, is 12 years old and already showing promise as a future lodge maker. He has the spatial intelligence, the careful observation skills, the patience needed to master this complex technology. But if he goes to the boarding school, those skills will die with him. Speaking of traditional ways brings punishment at these institutions. Teaching traditional skills is forbidden. Children who arrive speaking only their native languages are beaten until they learn English. It's cultural genocide disguised as education, and Joseph knows it. So he makes a decision that will echo through the generations. By moonlight, in secret, he begins teaching a small group of young people everything he knows. They meet in hidden places, remote valleys, abandoned buffalo wallows, anywhere government agents are unlikely to find them. Joseph doesn't just teach them how to build lodges, he teaches them why the knowledge matters, how it connects them to thousands of years of accumulated wisdom about living in harmony with the land. But the materials are disappearing as fast as the knowledge. With buffalo hides unavailable, Joseph's people learn to use canvas duck cloth acquired through trading posts. It's not ideal, canvas doesn't breathe like properly prepared hide, and it doesn't insulate as well. But it's waterproof, and it can be sewn into lodge covers that maintain the essential structural principles. When buffalo wool becomes unavailable for insulation, they learn to use cattle hair collected from slaughterhouses. When sinew becomes scarce, they discover that cotton thread, while not as strong, can serve for many purposes. The adaptations are ingenious, but they're also heartbreaking. Each substitution represents something irreplaceable that's been lost forever. The most devastating loss comes in the spring of 1878. Joseph's family has maintained the same set of lodge poles for over 300 years. These aren't just construction materials, they're heirlooms, carefully selected and maintained by 15 generations of his ancestors. Each pole has been seasoned, balanced, and adjusted over decades of use. They represent a physical connection to the deep past that cannot be replicated or replaced. When soldiers arrive to enforce the government's new policy requiring all Native Americans to live in permanent settlements, they give Joseph an ultimatum: abandon the traditional life completely, or see his family's possessions destroyed. Joseph watches, stone-faced, as his great-great-grandfather's lodge poles are piled up and burned. 3 centuries of accumulated knowledge and craftsmanship reduced to ashes in a single afternoon. But even as the visible markers of the old ways disappear, something remarkable happens. The knowledge goes underground. Meet Sarah Yellowbird, Joseph's niece. She's 31 years, old, married to a white trader, and living in what outsiders would consider an assimilated household. But Sarah has been paying attention to everything her uncle teaches, and she understands that someone needs to preserve this knowledge for future generations. In 1892, Sarah begins keeping a ledger. To any government inspector who might examine it, the ledger appears to contain household accounts, lists of supplies purchased, meals prepared, domestic activities. But Sarah has developed a code. Hidden within the apparently mundane entries are precise measurements for lodge construction, pole arrangements, hide preparation techniques, and wind management principles. Purchased 12 yards cotton cloth actually means the smoke flap system requires 12 specific adjustment positions for optimal draw. Prepared dinner for 17 guests translates to 17 poles arranged in the traditional pattern provide maximum structural integrity. It's ingenious, desperate, and absolutely crucial for what's coming next. Because Sarah isn't the only one preserving the knowledge. Across the plains, grandmothers hide miniature teepees in their sewing baskets, using them to teach construction principles to children through what appears to be simple play. Men memorize pole arrangements and wind tables like prayer songs, turning technical specifications into oral traditions that can be passed down even under the most repressive conditions. In hidden valleys where government agents rarely venture, secret gatherings take place. Elders teach young people the old ways, disguising instruction as religious ceremonies or social visits. The knowledge adapts, evolves, finds ways to survive even when the material culture that supported it has been largely destroyed. One of the most remarkable preservation efforts takes place at the Pine Ridge Reservation, where a group of women develops what they call the Winter Lodge Project. Unable to obtain traditional materials or build full-sized lodges, they create detailed scale models using whatever materials they can find. These models preserve exact proportions, construction sequences, and technical specifications. To outsiders, they look like dolls' houses. In reality, they're engineering blueprints disguised as toys. The underground network of knowledge preservation creates connections across tribal boundaries that hadn't existed for generations. Lakota grandmothers correspond with Blackfoot elders, comparing notes on hide preparation techniques. Cheyenne lodge keepers share innovations with Crow masters. They would have considered enemies in the old days. The threat to their shared knowledge creates bonds that transcend traditional rivalries. But perhaps the most poignant preservation effort comes from Joseph White Eagle himself. Unable to build traditional lodges, forbidden to teach openly, watching his culture disappear around him, Joseph makes one final desperate gesture. In 1894, as his health begins to fail, he spends an entire winter creating the most detailed lodge construction manual ever attempted. Using a combination of pictures, symbols, and written notes in his own language, he documents every aspect of the traditional knowledge, not just the technical specifications, but the philosophical underpinnings, the spiritual significance, the deep environmental wisdom that makes the whole system work. He hides this manual inside a sealed container and buries it near a sacred site, leaving cryptic instructions with his most trusted students about where it can be found when the time is right. Joseph dies in 1896, taking many secrets with him, but confident that the essential knowledge will survive. And he's right, because in 1973, something extraordinary happens that will validate everything these brave people fought to preserve. NASA, the same organization that puts humans on the moon, sends an engineer to Pine Ridge Reservation to study traditional lodge construction. Because, as it turns out, the ancient knowledge these people risked everything to preserve contains solutions to problems that modern technology is just beginning to understand. 1973. Nixon is president, the Vietnam War is winding down, and America is in the middle of both an energy crisis and an environmental awakening. And in this unlikely moment, an aerospace engineer named Robert Stevens finds himself driving across the South Dakota grasslands toward Pine Ridge Reservation, carrying instruments that would have seemed like magic to Joseph White Eagle, but pursuing knowledge that Joseph would have recognized immediately. Stevens works for NASA, and his job is to design habitats for space exploration. He's looking for innovative approaches to creating comfortable, energy-efficient living spaces in hostile environments using minimal resources. Someone in the agency, and we don't know who, which is one of those fascinating historical mysteries, suggested he look at traditional Native American architecture. Stevens expects to spend maybe 2 days at Pine Ridge, take some basic measurements, snap a few photos, and file a report that will gather dust in some government archive. What he discovers instead changes his understanding of everything he thought he knew about environmental engineering. He meets Jennifer Crowfeather, the great-granddaughter of Maria Crowfeather, the master lodge keeper we followed through the golden age of Buffalo years. Jennifer is 42 years old, a high school mathematics teacher, and one of the few people left who truly understands the traditional construction principles. When Stevens explains what he's looking for, Jennifer does something that surprises him completely. She laughs. "You want to study energy-efficient shelter design?" she says. "My ancestors perfected that 3,000 years ago, but nobody's been interested in listening." What follows is one of the most remarkable cross-cultural knowledge exchanges in modern history. Jennifer takes Stevens through every aspect of traditional lodge construction, but she does it using the language of modern engineering. She explains how the conical shape with adjustable smoke flaps creates what engineers call a stack effect, natural convection that moves air through the structure without requiring any external power source. She details how the 3-layer system creates thermal barriers that provide insulation values comparable to modern building materials. But Stevens doesn't just take Jennifer's word for it. He brings out his instruments. Thermal imaging reveals that a properly constructed and managed lodge maintains interior temperatures of 70 degrees when the outside temperature is 0, using nothing but a small fire and the passive solar heating created by the east-facing entrance. The thermal camera shows heat distribution patterns that would make modern architects weep with envy. Wind tunnel tests prove that the conical shape with properly adjusted smoke flaps creates aerodynamics that actually improve in high winds. Instead of fighting the wind like conventional buildings, the lodge design uses wind energy to enhance its ventilation system. The stronger the wind blows, the better the lodge breathes. Air quality measurements show that the natural convection system exchanges the entire interior air volume 15 times per hour while maintaining stable temperatures. Modern buildings with mechanical ventilation systems rarely achieve this level of air turnover efficiency. Stevens runs test after test, and every single measurement validates what Jennifer has been telling him. This isn't primitive technology, it's sophisticated environmental engineering disguised as ancient wisdom. The implications hit Stevens like a physical blow. Here's a shelter system that requires no external energy source, provides superior comfort, compared to conventional buildings, can be constructed from entirely natural materials, and can be completely disassembled and relocated without leaving any environmental impact. And it was perfected by people his own civilization had dismissed as primitive. Stevens writes a report that sends shockwaves through NASA and the broader engineering community. Suddenly, aerodynamics experts want to study smoke flap design. Thermal engineers are fascinated by the 3-layer insulation system. Architects are analyzing the structural properties of the circular base design. But the real impact comes when Stevens' report reaches the Native American community. For a century, traditional knowledge had been driven underground, preserved by people like Sarah Yellowbird and the grandmother networks, maintained against enormous pressure to abandon everything that connected them to their pre-contact heritage. Suddenly, the most technologically advanced organization in human history is validating what their ancestors had been trying to tell people for generations. The revival that follows is extraordinary. Jennifer Crowfeather finds herself traveling across the country, leading workshops for everyone from NASA engineers to environmental architects to ordinary people interested in sustainable living. She teaches construction techniques that had been hidden for decades, shares principles that solve modern problems, demonstrates technologies that offer alternatives to energy-intensive conventional building. But this isn't just about rediscovering old knowledge, it's about applying ancient principles to contemporary challenges. Modern teepee builders develop innovations that honor traditional principles while incorporating 21st century materials and insights. Solar panels get integrated into traditional designs in ways that are invisible from ground level, but provide all the electrical power a family needs. GPS systems help builders achieve the precise camp layouts that traditional people accomplished through intimate knowledge of local landscapes. Synthetic materials that replicate the properties of buffalo hide become available, allowing people to build authentic lodges without depending on animal products. These new materials are actually superior to the originals, in some ways more consistent in quality, more resistant to UV damage, easier to maintain over long periods. The knowledge spreads beyond native communities. Environmental architects begin incorporating traditional ventilation principles into modern sustainable buildings. Emergency management agencies study traditional construction techniques for developing rapid deployment shelter systems. Climate researchers examine traditional knowledge for insights into living comfortably in extreme environments without fossil fuel dependence. Indigenous architects like Tammy Eagle Bull Scott begin consulting on major construction projects worldwide, bringing traditional environmental principles to bear on everything from university buildings to corporate headquarters. The circular-based structural principles show up in disaster-resistant housing designs. The natural ventilation systems influence green building standards. Perhaps most remarkably, the annual Crow Fair becomes a living laboratory for traditional technology application. Picture this. It's August 2023, and over 1,000 teepees are arranged in perfect geometric patterns across the valley near Crow Agency, Montana. This is the largest gathering of traditional lodges in over a century, and it's not just a cultural celebration, it's a demonstration of sustainable living principles that offers solutions for our climate-challenged future. Thermal imaging drones flying over the gathering reveal heat signatures that tell an incredible story. Lodge after lodge maintains comfortable interior temperatures, despite outside conditions that range from near freezing at night to over 90 degrees during the day. The energy consumption for the entire gathering, housing, cooking, lighting for several thousand people, is a fraction of what a conventional campground would require. The air quality throughout the camp is superior to most urban environments, despite thousands of cooking fires and the complete absence of mechanical ventilation systems. The natural convection created by properly managed lodges creates air circulation patterns that prevent the buildup of smoke or pollutants. Water usage is minimal because traditional camp management techniques work with natural drainage patterns instead of fighting them. Waste production is almost negligible because traditional lifestyles generate far fewer disposable materials than conventional living arrangements. The gathering demonstrates something profound, that ancient knowledge isn't just historically interesting, it's practically essential for addressing contemporary environmental challenges. Jennifer Crow, Feather, now in her 90s, sits outside her lodge on the final evening of the gathering, watching her great-granddaughter teach a group of young people how to read wind patterns and adjust smoke flaps accordingly. The knowledge that Joseph White Eagle risked everything to preserve, that Sarah Yellowbird encoded in seemingly innocent ledger entries, that grandmother networks maintained through generations of suppression, is now being passed on openly to anyone willing to learn. But Jennifer knows this revival represents more than just the preservation of traditional knowledge. It represents a fundamental shift in how human beings think about their relationship with the natural world. For centuries, the dominant approach to shelter has been based on conquest imposing human will on natural forces, creating artificial environments that require constant energy inputs to maintain. The traditional lodge approach is based on partnership, understanding natural forces, and designing systems that work with them rather than against them. As climate change forces humanity to reconsider its entire approach to energy consumption and environmental impact, the wisdom embedded in traditional teepee technology offers a model for sustainable living that industrial civilization desperately needs. The wind still blows across the Great Plains, just as it did 3,000 years ago when Morning Star first observed eagles riding the air currents. But now that wind carries new possibilities, the possibility that ancient wisdom and modern technology can combine to create ways of living that honor both human needs and environmental limits. The knowledge that began with one woman watching birds in a snowstorm has become a bridge between worlds, offering solutions for challenges that didn't exist when the knowledge was first developed. It's proof that human wisdom, carefully preserved and thoughtfully applied, can transcend any single era or culture. The embers that Joseph, White Eagle and his contemporaries kept alive through the darkest period of cultural suppression have indeed grown into a living flame, one that offers light and warmth for anyone wise enough to learn from it.